r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Theeaglestrikes. I work for an experimental tech company. Somebody downloaded a virus onto my brain. Part 1. This post contains classified information that the UK and US governments have been protecting for decades. Becoming a whistleblower could cost my life, but I need to inform the world of my dreadful invention. I need to ensure that this technology never leaks. This mustn't happen to anyone else. I work for +, but you won't find any information on that company. The organization doesn't officially exist. You can't apply for a job. We headhunt the best of the best. Government funding allows us to develop experimental technology that far exceeds the capabilities of anything publicly available. We developed smartphone technology in the 1940s, shortly after Alan Turing created the computer. Our company is that far ahead. It usually takes decades for our inventions to reach the real world. +, was originally founded in 1947 as a joint American and British investment into cutting-edge technological advancements. At first, we simply wanted to end wars, but the company became much more than that. It became a challenge. What can humans achieve? Friendly competition between the London and Los Angeles branches has pushed us far beyond anything we ever thought could be achieved. My name's Cole Dent. I work at the London office. In early 2022, I invented something game-changing. I developed a way of transmitting information between the human mind and a computer. I'm not talking about the scanning technology that already exists. I'm talking about actually treating the human brain like a hard drive. I started the project in 2012. After years of hearing people say that the brain was essentially just a big computer, I thought to myself, well, yes, so let's treat it like one. It took me 10 years of research and development, but I finally created an implant that can read brain signals, process them, and transmit them to other electronic devices. The implant can also receive data, transmitting it to the brain. We display the brain data on a GUI, graphical user interface, which was developed by my colleague and close friend, Mia Porter. We can access the human brain from a computer. The scope of our creation became fully apparent to us when Mia downloaded Shakespeare's entire works to my brain, and I suddenly found that I could recount every single word from every single story. I'd never read a single Shakespeare story before. We both won the +- award for 2022. My British colleagues were chuffed for me, but I can't say the same for my American ones. It's safe to say that a lot of people at the LA branch were pissed. For some of us, the yearly award is a friendly competition. For others, it's serious. I didn't really appreciate that at first. Now, however, I understand. This isn't a game. Let's just say that I noticed a change after my breakthrough. I faced a lot more resistance from the LA branch. Collaborative projects were denied, applications for certain contracts were rejected, and American colleagues ghosted me. They even avoided us at the annual Christmas party, which was held at the London office this year, in honor of Mia and me winning the award. And so, last Friday, I found myself partying in the corner of the room with my British co-workers. "Don't worry about it," Jerry said. "The Yanks will get over it next year when one of them no doubt wins the +- award for something. Just savor your moment in the sun." It does kind of suck, though, Mia sighed. I was working on that NASA project with Dr. Carlson, and he just replaced me with one of his better-suited LA colleagues. "At least Bert is still talking to me," I chuckled. "Yeah, well, Bert's a solid lad," Jerry laughed. "He said he secretly likes to go against the grain because he's from New York, and he fucking hates LA. But he can't hate it that much, can he? He lives and works there." "Is that why you secretly hate us, Cole?" Mia asked. "You Northerners fucking hate Southerners, don't you?" I chortled. I originally hated the idea of moving away from Preston. But I sold my soul when they told me the salary they'd pay for this job. Course, nobody from North speaks to me, now I'm a Londoner. "North," Jerry mocked. "Man, I love that you sound like Jon Snow." "It's sad," Mia said. "I guess no matter where you go, everybody finds a way to shrink their tribe. Maybe aggressive competition is inevitable. Why fight it? Yeah, that's the spirit. Let's just stand in the corner and drink. It's like shit. There's Bert." "Bert," Jerry called. Bert grinned at us from across the dance floor and strolled away from his American colleagues, stretching his arms wide to embrace Jerry. "Happy holidays. How you doing, you fucking dicks?" Bert asked us, laughing. "I was fine until you said happy holidays," Jerry groaned. "What's the damage?" I asked, smirking. Bert sucked his teeth. The jolly Californians fucking hate you at the moment. Especially Richard. He wants blood, Cole. I'd steer well clear of him. You're probably okay, Mia. He likes you. The feeling definitely isn't mutual, Mia assured him. Can you try and talk them around? You know I'm under a lot of pressure to get the wheels turning with my mind tech. I just need them to throw me a bone, I said. Bert shrugged. I dunno, man. I think you should let the water settle, you know? Wait for them to cool off. Besides, you and Mia don't need them. You've proven that already. Mia grinned at me. Yeah, asshole. Why do you want to go running to the Americans? I mean, obviously, you can come running to me. I'd love to leech off your success, Bert laughed. Anyway, this is a party. Can we not just be festive and forget all of that crap? We were interrupted. And the interruption came from Richard, of all people. Hey, Richard said, appearing next to Bert. Congratulations, Porter, and Dent. He was the kind of person to address everyone by their surname. I just know he wanted us to extend the same professionalism, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Thanks, Mia mumbled. Thank you, Richard, I said. Maybe we could work together? I really admire your AI research. That's gonna change the world. You're on the verge of creating a sentient machine, right? Give me another 5 years, Richard said, shrugging. I'm more interested in your research, Dent. Sorry for not replying to your email this week. It's just been hectic at the LA branch, you know? But I'm definitely interested in working with you. Bert's jaw dropped. You've gotta be fucking kidding me, you liar. You were bitching about the Brits all week. Richard shot Bert a fiery glare. Do you always have to stir things, Dawson? We all flew over to this little island for a party. Clearly, there's no bad blood. Stop being dramatic. Now, Dent, can I privately pick your brain for a moment? Sure, I replied, silently seething at the misogynistic prick. Aren't you forgetting somebody? Richard shook his head. Porter's work is astounding, but I don't specialize in software development. I've not forgotten her. I just want to talk to you about neuroscience. I sighed, throwing Mia an apologetic glance. She looked relieved, which made me feel a little less furious. I nodded my head at Richard and followed him away from the main raucousness of the party. You've got the implant in your head right now, haven't you? The second we were out of anyone's earshot, Richard blurted out the question. He opened the main doors to the hall, and we strolled out onto a deserted corridor. Yeah, I replied. It helps Mia and I to run 24/7 experiments. Richard smiled. Incredible. Look, I know I'm a bit of prick, but I do that to save face. I get swept up by the group mentality, you know? I don't want to be a social pariah, like Bert. I shook my head, as if to say that it were fine, but I didn't buy his apology for a second. What's on your mind, Richard? I asked. Cutting through the bullshit, he said, smiling. I like you, Dent. There's that genius brain of yours. You see right through me, don't you? Well, I pulled you aside because I want to conduct a little side experiment on with you. Let's skip the red tape. No need to tell our superiors. Do you want the 2023 award? I certainly do. We could win it together, and then the rivalry between England and the States might abate for a year. I sighed. Go on, Richard. Spill the beans. Okay, he replied, beaming from ear to ear. I worked with one of our software developers to create something that could cure mental illness. Think about it. You've unlocked the mind, so let's do something about that. Let's fix all of the things that are wrong with the human psyche. You don't let an old operating system gather dust. You update it. I frowned. The higher-ups are already talking about therapeutic applications of my technology, but we can't rush into that, Richard. I'm sure we'll make advancements in psychological rewiring over the coming years, but we have to take baby steps. Why do you think Mia and I are running so many tests? You can't just screw around in people's brains. Do you really want to leave it a couple of years, Dent? Yeah, you could do that. And I bet somebody in a higher position at dozen minus would develop this exact same technology. They'd get all of the credit, steal the award, and leave you in the dust. The entire company would probably forget all about the fact that you were the one who figured out how to connect the human brain to technology in the first place. Do people talk about Alan Turing as much as they talk about Bill Gates or Steve Jobs? I mean, yes? I replied, frowning. Richard clenched his fists in frustration. Look, success came easily to you. You've only been working here for 10 years. And you're only 30 years old. I've been at dozen minus for 25 years. I'm 48 years old. I've never won a single award. So many of my colleagues have pinched my ideas and turned them into successes. I'm sick of it. I don't want to wait anymore, okay? Help me, Dent. Help me to be remembered. Before I agree to anything, let's just calm down, alright? I pleaded. Just tell me what you have. Richard smiled gleefully. I've been working with Samson. You've met him, I think. Well, I used your mind technology to compartmentalize mental health conditions and bottle them up into neat little packages. Samson developed a program that sorts them into readable files. We could develop a form of antivirus, Dent. We could fix anything that's wrong with the human brain. How did you access my tech? I asked. Richard shrugged. We're geniuses, Dent. It's easy to access anything we want on the company servers. You should talk to the security department. They didn't protect your research very well. My patience had finally worn out. I want to do things properly, Richard. This job has changed my life. Going behind the backs of the seniors at dozen minus would be foolish. And I don't appreciate you snooping on my research without talking to me first. Richard's smile transformed into a terrifying grimace. The charming facade had already been hanging by a thread, but it vanished with unnerving ease. The disturbed man reached into his pocket, producing a small, metallic device. He waved it in front of me. I wasn't really asking for permission, Richard said. You see, the real fool in this scenario is you. You're walking around with a giant computer attached to your brain. And that computer isn't protected, Dent. Why haven't you or Mia developed any form of antivirus software? My breathing quickened, and I started to understand the American's ill intent. What did you do, Richard? I whispered, desperately attempting to conceal the horror in my voice. I think you've figured it out. You're smart. Wireless technology. I've been downloading something nasty onto your implant for the past 5 minutes. You see, I read your research. Your invention is truly impressive. Your brain doesn't just upload to the implant, does it? Your implant can feed information into the brain. I gulped. The brain implant was supposed to improve time management and intelligence. No need to spend years learning a language, download a course to your brain. No need to spend months getting to know somebody, download their character file to your brain. No need to worry about Alzheimer's, restore backed up memories whenever the disease erases them. I hadn't considered humanity's malicious intentions. Dozen minus is a bubble. Everybody looks out for each other. We don't think about the real world. We don't think about the dangers that come with browsing the internet, for example. I'd never paused to think of computer viruses. We live in our own little technological paradise. And Richard had burst that bubble. Judging from the look on your face, I'd say Porter didn't put any defensive measures in place, did she? Richard chuckled. What did you download to the implant, Richard? I shakily asked. His smile faded. The unhinged psychopath looked at me with cold, unfeeling eyes. His next words filled my heart with overwhelming dread. A virus, he said. It's currently installing all sorts of goodies onto your mind. I suddenly realized that my body wasn't simply frozen in fear. I know how anxiety feels, and it wasn't that. I actually felt sick. Physically and mentally sick. My body was fighting a virus, but it wasn't one that could be cured with antibiotics. It was locked away in my mind. I had no idea what it was doing to my brain, and that horrifying thought engulfed me. Feeling cold? Richard asked. I've always found it remarkable that the brain can influence the behavior of the body. The door to the main hall suddenly swung open. Richard's face dropped. Realizing we'd been interrupted, he swiftly barged past me, disappearing down the corridor before anybody could stop him. Mia was standing in the doorway, looking at me with a severely concerned expression. Cole? She asked. What did Richard say to you? You look so pale. Shivering with a mixture of terror and anxiety, not knowing what horrors Richard had downloaded onto my mind, I reached out for Mia. She steadied me before I could topple over. We need to go to the 30th floor, I croaked. It's a party, Cole. And it's the weekend. Besides, you don't seem to be in a fit state to work, Mia answered. You look unwell. I think we need to get you to bed and possibly even call a doctor. Mia. I wheezed, clutching at her shirt. Only we can fix what Richard's done to me. What are you? What has he done? Mia gasped. He's put something bad in my head. I slowly groaned. We need to look at the go-away. We need to see what's on my brain. Mia hurried me inside the nearest lift and repeatedly hammered ''S.B. 30 with a shaky thumb. There had been no sign of Richard along the corridor. I wanted to find him. I wanted to squeeze the truth out of him. What had the bastard downloaded onto my mind? My heart raced, and I could no longer tell whether that was due to fear or whatever horrific thing the virus was doing to me. "What the fuck, Cole?" Mia cried, as we rode the lift down to sub-basement 30. "What?" I asked. "You just said, I could kill you," she said, trembling. "You were growling like an animal." "What the fuck are?" I didn't finish my sentence. The virus. I didn't remember saying anything to Mia. I didn't hear myself say anything. It was at that moment I realized I could no longer trust my experience of reality. With Richard's virus in my head, I could be seeing or hearing whatever he wanted me to see or hear. He could distort my vision, my hearing, and even my memories. He could make me say things I didn't want to say. He could make me do things I don't want to do, I realized, shuddering. "Mia," I said, speaking quickly, whilst I felt I still had some semblance of control over my senses. "It's very, very important that you listen to me. I can't be trusted, okay? This virus could make me do absolutely anything. I'm not in control of my mind anymore. I don't know what Richard has installed, but I think it's distorting my perception of reality." Mia didn't respond. She continued to stare straight ahead, watching the gray, metallic doors of the lift. Her eyes were wide open. Unblinking. Her arms were hanging by her sides. She was a statue. "Mia?" I repeated, quivering. Still no response. The lift was taking a very long time to reach sub-basement 30. I looked at the screen that should have shown our current floor. The digital display was glitching out, manically flicking through a variety of numbers. The lift was still rattling around, as it plummeted deeper and deeper into the earth. It felt as if we were descending into hell. None of it was real. I finally comprehended that. It had already started. My perception of reality was false. "Richard," I cried. "Just stop. Please. What do you want?" No reply. Not from Richard, anyway. I heard a slight, sinister giggle from my left. I slowly turned my head to face Mia. She was looking at me with a tilted head, blood-filled eyes, and a truly unpleasant grin. With her teeth bared and viciously grinding together, she persisted with that horrible giggle. "Who's Richard?" she asked, smiling. The lift doors opened. I turned to face the opening. There was nothing but a black void beyond the lift. My legs moved without my permission. I found myself stumbling into the darkness, leaving Mia in the lift behind. That wasn't Mia, I thought. And you might not even have been in a lift. Don't trust your... No. My own sense of self was starting to fracture. The virus was preventing me from forming thoughts. There were no limits to what it could do, I realized. It could completely wipe my brain clean and leave me a vegetable, if that were Richard's desire. But I wasn't dealing with Richard anymore. I was dealing with whatever malicious thing he'd placed in my head. I turned to face the lift, but it was gone. The darkness, however, had started to lift, ever so slightly. I wasn't in a void. I was in a corridor. Sub-basement 30. It was dimly lit by red emergency lighting in the floor. I used the faint lights to guide me. A haunting sound startled me. "Give me your mind." The voice sounded artificial. It was static-ridden and emanated from all directions. There was no way to pinpoint the source of the voice. I suppose it had no pinpoint. None of it was real. Everything in the brain is real. We were in my brain, after all. Everything in the brain is real. It was coming from everywhere. Everything in the brain is real. It was the virus. I had to think, whilst I still could. Every part of me wanted to scratch at the side of my neck, tear out the implant, and put this science experiment to an end. No. The virus has already been uploaded to your brain, so that wouldn't stop it. You need the implant to get rid of the virus. Was I even in sub-basement 30? I had no idea, but I had to hope so. I pushed onwards. My legs felt like lead. With every step, they became heavier and heavier, until they buckled beneath me. Crawling on the floor, my body started to become numb. I was paralyzed. Horrified, I realized that Richard's virus was attacking my body through my mind. I squirmed around on the floor, but it was no use. The harder I wrestled with the invisible force, the stiller I became. My heart pounded. I'd never been so helpless and frightened. What could I do? Your body isn't actually paralyzed. It's all in your mind. I closed my eyes and pictured myself standing up. I pictured my weightless legs carrying me forwards. No more wrestling with the pain in my head. Like so many other mental conditions, I knew that wrestling with my thoughts would only make things worse. I had to go with the flow, right? I always hated meditation, but I really needed it to work. Just this once. The pins and needles in my legs started to fade away. I found myself wriggling, but it wasn't in a constricted way, I was wriggling freely. Keeping my breathing steady, I slowly started to ground myself and recover the feeling in my limbs, gently pulling myself to my feet. Victory. Then, I heard a piercing stab of static in my ears. I clutched the sides of my head in agony. I'd never heard something so loud. This time, the sound could be traced. It came from behind me. I spun around and faced something awful. A malignant, malformed version of myself stood at the other end of the corridor. It wore my face, as if it were a mask, but its eyes were just glassy spheres that sat in the middle of its glitchy face. This was the embodiment of the virus. The intruder. It stood and watched me. It wasn't real. Everything in the brain is real. It was just the virus. The virus is real. As my doppelganger's arms grew longer and longer, feverishly reaching towards me, I screamed. Riddled with bone-chilling fear at the prospect of my mind being hijacked and overwritten, I fled from the demonic entity. As I did so, the corridor started to stretch. With every step forwards, the end of the corridor moved farther and farther away. I was on a never-ending treadmill. I squeezed my eyelids together. Don't wrestle with it. Don't give it power. This is your brain. When I opened my eyes, the corridor was shrinking again. The door to my office was slowly getting closer. I sprinted the last 100 yards, which was actually just a few elongated yards. Grasping the door handle with both hands, I pushed it open. I stumbled into desks, slowly making my way over to the laptop in the corner of the expansive office. My vision started to blur. Richard's one mistake was that he and Samson had coded the virus to obstruct my way. That was how I could tell what was real and what wasn't. I must be in my office because he really doesn't want me to reach that laptop. Every time I tried to get closer to my desk, my reality became a little more distorted. But you don't really know. You can't be certain. This might not be reality. You could currently be passed out in the middle of the corridor. You could still be in the lift. I knew that rubbing my eyes would not solve the blurriness, so I strived, yet again, to center myself and remain calm. I was drenched in sweat at this point, fighting a fever, as if I were infected with a real virus. But I could vaguely make out most of the details on my laptop screen. I opened the program that Mia and I developed. Imaginatively named Mind Goe. It automatically connected to my brain. I found myself looking at a clusterfuck of chaos. The desktop screen of the GUI seemed relatively intact. I could see all the usual icons. CNS, Central Nervous System. RAM, Random Access Memory. Language. Creative Center. Amygdala. Nerves. But there was a new icon. Goodbye.gc. That had to be it. The virus. I right-clicked it, and felt my heart thump triumphantly when the menu of options appeared. I immediately clicked delete. Ah, I yelled. Searing pain flooded my brain like a red-hot poker through the base of my skull. An error message popped up on the screen. File cannot be deleted. Of course it fucking can, I thought, supporting myself with one hand on the desk. I was starting to lose hope at this point. I was petrified of the idea that I might be stuck in a state of psychological torture forever. There was nothing more horrifying than the concept of being trapped in a perpetual hell of the mind. There were no limits to the torture that Richard's virus could inflict. Maybe I'm imagining this scene. I could be convulsing on the floor, drawing my last breath, but he's found a way to make my final moment of life last 1,000 years? My head was swimming with nightmarish scenarios. I had to focus. I had to think of something else to fix this pain. That was when it hit me. Antivirus. Richard had taunted me for not setting up any kind of defense in the brain implant. Perhaps it was too late for preventative measures, but it wasn't too late for reactive measures. Obviously, delete was too simple, but I had an idea of something that I could do. Not a fix. A plaster. Something to help me regain control of my brain. Setting up an antivirus was straightforward. That was my first task. Within 30 minutes, I'd created one and installed it on my brain. If I'd done that earlier, I wouldn't even be in this whole situation. Once I'd set up a well-defended, virus-proof program, preventing any new Trojan horses from wriggling their way into my brain, I set to work on a looping program. I hadn't figured out how to safely remove the virus from my brain, but a loop could stop it from continuing to override or erase my mind, at least. What do I mean by a loop? Well, I didn't include any hard reset features on the implant. The idea of accidentally wiping my brain was a little too terrifying. but I did include a temporary restore point feature. It doesn't delete or reset anything, unfortunately, so it wouldn't be able to get rid of the virus. However, it does essentially defragment any messy parts of the brain, hard drive, and it also resets things like vision, memory, the central nervous system, and so on. The looping program, therefore, seemed like the perfection solution. It continuously restores my brain to a previous backup point. Like I said, it's a plaster, not a fix. I'm still constantly slipping into the throes of the virus, but I then find myself returning back to a more trustworthy interpretation of reality. It's a terrifying cycle, but at least I'm safeguarding my brain, for now. When I initially set up the looping program and pressed start, I was faced with a horrific sight. My perception returned to reality. My eyes revealed what was really in front of me. Firstly, I found myself standing in my office. So, that was real. The only difference was that the lights were on, and there was no shadowy doppelganger lurking in any corners. I exited my office and saw the other difference. The lift was at the end of the corridor again. Strangely, the doors were still open, and the lift had not been called to any other floors. That was when I saw her. MIA. I screamed. I sprinted down the corridor, almost slipping on the maroon pool of blood that trailed back to the lift. There, lying in a crumpled mess, was the corpse of Mia Porter. A beautiful, kind-hearted soul. She was lying on her front. She had clearly endured horrifyingly brutal blunt force trauma. Her arms and legs had been stomped into piles of gory mush. Her neck was twisted around so that her head was facing backwards. Her vacant face looked up at me. Her expression was haunted. Her eyes were still wide open, as was her mouth. She looked as if she'd seen something utterly petrifying before she died. And that was when I remembered. Restoring my mind to a previous backup had given me the ability to recall memories, something the virus had been blocking. The lift memory came flooding back to me. "I could kill you," I growled. "What the fuck, Cole?" Mia asked. It seemed that the conversation I initially remembered had been a fantasy. In reality, neither she nor I had said anything else. In reality, I lunged for Mia, pinching her throat in my weaponized hands, and viciously proceeded to crush her limbs against the lift walls. I repeatedly slammed my knees into them. Gasping for a few final breaths, Mia died slowly and painfully. Reliving the memory was a visceral experience. I vomited. I bawled. I collapsed into a fetal position on the floor of the still stationary lift. I realized the implications of this ghastly creation. I realized what dangerous man could do with the power to infect a person's mind. I rushed back to my laptop to write this post. I know it was the virus that killed Mia, but I still don't know whether I can live with myself. I need to delete this evil thing in my head before I snap and do something even worse. The looping program is a great reset button, but it hasn't fixed anything. I've simply bought time.